Hello, students, and welcome. Today, we are going to look at a very important life process. It's a system that's working inside you this very moment, the transportation system in human beings. Think of it as the network that keeps every single one of your cells alive and well.
So, what are we going to cover today? Let's quickly look at our roadmap. First, we'll ask why we even need transport. Then we'll talk about blood, which is the fluid of life. After that, we'll look at the body's highway network, the blood vessels. Next, we'll understand the heart, our amazing double pump. And finally, we'll touch upon some system checks and balances. So, let's get started.
Okay, let's begin with our first section. To understand this whole system, we must first ask a very basic question. Why do we need such a complicated system for transport in the first place?
Now think about a tiny, single-celled organism, something like an amoeba. Its entire body is just one cell, and it's always in contact with the water around it. So it gets everything it needs, like food and oxygen, just by a simple process called diffusion, right through its surface. But can our body cells do the same? Well, for a huge organism like us, made of trillions and trillions of cells, that simple method just won't work.
So here's the key difference. You see, diffusion is a very slow process, and it only works well over very small distances. In our bodies, most of our cells are deep inside, right? They are not in direct contact with the air or the food we eat. Just imagine, it's been calculated that it would take about 3 years for a single molecule of oxygen to diffuse from our lungs all the way down to our toes. 3 years! Clearly that's not going to work. And that is precisely why we need a special, dedicated transport system.
All right, so if diffusion isn't the answer, what is? Well, our transport system has several parts. Let's begin with the fluid that does all the carrying, the fluid of life, our blood.
Now, blood is not just some red liquid, okay? It's actually a type of connective tissue. It's made of a liquid part, which we call plasma, and floating in this plasma are different types of cells. We have the red blood cells, or RBCs, the white blood cells, or WBCs, and something called platelets.
So what do each of these components do? Each one has a very important and specific job. Let's look at them. First, plasma. Think of it as the delivery truck. It carries dissolved food, carbon dioxide, waste products, and even hormones. Next, the red blood cells. Their main job is to carry oxygen, and they do this with the help of a special red pigment called hemoglobin. Then we have the white blood cells. These are like the soldiers of our body, always fighting off germs and protecting us from infections. And lastly, we have platelets. If you get a cut, these tiny cells rush to the spot and help clot the blood to stop the bleeding.
Okay, so we have the fluid, the blood. But how does this blood travel all over the body? Well, it needs a network of tubes, like a massive highway system. And these tubes are what we call blood vessels.
Now, there are mainly two big types of blood vessels. We have arteries and we have veins. The main difference? Arteries always carry blood away from the heart. And because the blood is being pumped out with great force, the arteries have thick and elastic walls to handle that high pressure. Veins, on the other hand, carry blood back towards the heart. By then, the pressure is much lower, so their walls are thinner. Another very important point is that veins have valves inside them. Why? To make sure the blood flows only in one direction, towards the heart, and doesn't flow backwards.
So, arteries carry blood away from the heart, and veins bring it back. But what happens in between? How do they connect? Well, arteries divide into smaller and smaller tubes, and finally into these extremely fine vessels called capillaries. They are so thin that their walls are only 1 cell thick. And this is where the real work gets done. It's here, in the capillaries, that oxygen and food pass from the blood into the cells, and waste products, like carbon dioxide, move from the cells back into the blood. Then, these capillaries join up again to form veins.
So we have the fluid, we have the pipes. What's missing? The pump. And that brings us to the most important part of this system, the engine that powers it all, the human heart.
Our heart is a muscular organ, about the size of our fist. The most important thing to remember is that it has 4 chambers. You have 2 upper chambers called the atria and 2 lower chambers called the ventricles. Now, why 4 chambers? This design is absolutely brilliant because its main purpose is to prevent the oxygen-rich blood from mixing with the carbon dioxide-rich blood. This separation is key.
Let's follow the path of the blood, step by step. We'll start with the deoxygenated blood, which is sometimes called impure blood because it's full of carbon dioxide.
So this blood from all over the body enters the top right chamber, the right atrium. The right atrium then contracts and pushes the blood down into the right ventricle. From there, the right ventricle contracts and pumps this blood all the way to the lungs. And what happens in the lungs? It drops off the carbon dioxide and picks up fresh oxygen.
Okay, now what about the pure or oxygenated blood? This fresh, oxygen-rich blood comes back from the lungs and enters the top left chamber, the left atrium. The left atrium contracts, pushing the blood down into the powerful left ventricle. Now, the left ventricle's walls are very thick and muscular because when it contracts, it has to pump that blood with a lot of force to all parts of the body, from your head all the way to your toes. So if you noticed, for one complete trip around the body, the blood actually passes through the heart twice, right? First it goes to the lungs and comes back, then it goes to the rest of the body and comes back. And because the blood passes through the heart twice in one circuit, this is called double circulation. It's a very efficient system that makes sure our body gets a good supply of oxygen.
All right, we're almost at the end. Let's quickly look at two other important ideas related to our transport system. You must have heard your parents or elders talk about blood pressure, or BP. What is it, really? It's just the pressure or the force that the blood puts on the walls of the arteries. We measure it with two numbers. The top number is the systolic pressure. That's the pressure when the heart is contracting and pumping blood out. The bottom number is the diastolic pressure. That's the pressure when the heart relaxes between beats. For a healthy adult, a normal reading is around 120 by 80. Now, besides blood, we have another transport fluid in our body. It's called lymph. You see, when blood flows through the tiny capillaries, some of the plasma leaks out into the spaces between our cells. This leaked fluid is called lymph, or tissue fluid. The lymphatic system collects this extra fluid and also helps transport digested fats. It then cleans it up and returns it to the blood. So you can think of it as a parallel drainage system.
So, we've talked about all these different parts, but why is this system so important? Well, because it doesn't work alone. It is the lifeline that connects all the other life processes together.
Just think about it. How does the food that is absorbed in your small intestine reach every cell? The transport system. How does the oxygen you breathe in get from your lungs to your muscles? The transport system. And how do the waste products from your cells get to the kidneys to be removed? Again, the transport system. So you see, life processes like nutrition, respiration, and excretion are all completely dependent on it.
So as we finish, I want to leave you with one important thought for your revision. Whenever you study biology, always try to connect the structure of something with its function. Ask yourself questions like, why is a red blood cell shaped the way it is? Or why are the walls of the left ventricle thicker than the right? When you start finding the answers to these why questions, that's when you'll really start to understand the subject. Thank you.